Welcome to Real USA. Today we're in Ferguson, Missouri. About 3 months ago, a police officer shot dead a black unarmed teenager here, creating a nationwide debate about racism and socioeconomic inequality in the United States. This week on Real USA, we'll talk about that event and many others like it that show another reality of life in the United States, brought to you only by Telesaur. I'm Sarah Begum. You can follow us on Twitter at Telesaur English and share your views as you watch the program. 3 months have passed and tensions are still high in Missouri after the assassination of a young African American, Michael Brown. Many residents are afraid that chaos could erupt again, but the demands of protesters go beyond claiming for justice in a community that's already afflicted with violence. Steve Mort brings us this report from St. Louis.
Night after night, for more than 2 months now, angry protesters have been taking to the streets in Ferguson. Weeks after these riots rocked the St. Louis suburb, crowds still regularly gather outside the Ferguson Police Department, calling for the officer who shot Michael Brown to be indicted. And despite a leaked autopsy report showing the teenager may have reached for Officer Darren Wilson's gun before the shooting, there is no sign of tensions easing.
Many local residents say the frustrations of the African American community in St. Louis run deeper than the shooting of Michael Brown. Many say that the harsh economic realities in poorer parts of the city provide fuel for the ongoing tensions.
Leanna Moore has been cutting hair in Ferguson for more than 20 years. She says the problems were here long before Michael Brown was killed.
Where there's no jobs, there's no money. You know, and I think that a lot of these people are having a very hard time getting a job in this area and outside of this area.
St. Louis is consistently ranked as one of America's most dangerous cities, with high levels of violent crime, including assaults, murders and rapes. A new commission launched by Missouri's governor has been tasked with looking into the social and economic conditions underlying the unrest. Some local residents say a poor public education system hampers African Americans' chances of going to college and getting well-paid jobs.
We don't have the income to get into the schools that we want to go to. So if you don't have the incomes, then how are you going to, get a loan to go to school?
Other residents say tough new standards for schools in the St. Louis area have meant some school districts losing their accreditation, making it more difficult for students to move into higher education after they graduate.
Even if you graduate from high school, there's nothing guaranteeing that you'll be able to go to college with the high school diploma that you receive from the local schools.
And community leaders point to high levels of expulsions from schools as a reason that many young men end up disenfranchised.
Zero tolerance policies create a pipeline from the schoolyard to the prison yard. We have a system that has systematically excluded African Americans, Latinos, poor whites from the American dream.
A decision on whether to indict Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson is expected to come next month. Steve Mort for Telesaur in St. Louis.
It may have started with the death of Michael Brown, but it didn't end there. Let's take a look back at how that fateful day in August and the events that followed forever changed how we talk about race and police conduct in the United States.
It may have started with the death of Michael Brown, but it hasn't ended there. Nearly 4 months after that fateful day in August and the social unrest it provoked, anticipation about a grand jury's decision on whether to indict Officer Darren Wilson or not has an entire community on the edge of its seat.
We are all working together and working very sincerely to ensure that in the days ahead that we can preserve peace and maintain public trust.
Fear that a non-indictment could provoke riots and violence has motivated businesses in Ferguson to board up their windows and gun sales in the St. Louis area to skyrocket. As Missouri Governor Jane Nixon maintains the state of emergency in a time of peace, residents speculate that a decision has already been made.
I feel like they already know that Darren Wilson is not going to be indicted on the murder of Mike Brown. I just feel like they're just preparing themselves for the worst.
And they're just preparing for it. You see all these police officers with riot shields and stuff, you know what I'm saying? Why they got to have riot shields and we ain't got nothing? Is we walking the streets with AKs? We ain't walking the streets with AKs. What they got tanks for?
With each passing day, the Ferguson police station and the site where Michael Brown was killed have both become focal points of a cat-and-mouse game between police and protesters, leading to nightly arrests. But despite the building tension, more experienced community members have little hope for change.
To be honest with you, I really don't know, because it's been unjust for me for a while, and that's all I really know.
What will happen once the grand jury's verdict is announced remains to be seen. One thing that's certain, though, is that Ferguson and the entire country have already changed forever. Alexandra Hall, Ferguson, Missouri, Telesur.
Closing down schools has become the norm in some of the biggest cities in the United States, and many groups indicate that this could disproportionately impact minority students. A new report shows just how many are being closed down, devastating an entire community.
Iris Manaya loves raising her teenage daughter in this quiet New York City neighborhood and was happy sending her to school here, just around the corner from home. But now school is officially out for Public School 19. Like the over 140 schools that closed in New York City since 2002, the Department of Education says students here were underperforming, with no signs of improvement. Public School 19 is phasing out to make way for a new school, with a stronger program that will invite kids from across the city. Students like Iris's daughter were invited to sign up, but she says they were not encouraged.
La escuela que está ahora está recibiendo alumnos de todas las partes de la ciudad de Nueva York.
The new school is getting kids from all around New York. 5 or 6 school buses arrive to the school. Why didn't they help the old school? Why didn't the school get the same help the new school is having?
¿Por qué se esperó que la escuela tuviera en un momento tan difícil para entonces cerrarla? O sea, ¿por qué no se le dio la misma ayuda que se le está dando a la nueva escuela, a nuestra escuela?
Closing underperforming schools to make way for stronger programs was a plan by New York's former mayor, Michael Bloomberg, to boost graduation rates. The plan worked for many, but parent activists say it didn't work for all, and that many minority students are falling through the cracks.
The common denominator, the common factors that has happened in communities of color and where there's high poverty happening. You know, we'll close one, we'll push those kids in others. Only 12% of Black and Latino children were graduating high school, college, and career ready.
In a recent report, Journey for Justice found cities like New York, Detroit, and Chicago, with large minority populations, have recently pulled the plug on more than 100 public schools. Public advocate Pedro Nogueira says it's a national challenge and blames officials across America for giving schools a failing mark instead of helping them to succeed.
It's ironic because we want to judge kids based on performance, but we don't judge the states based upon what they do to support the education of children. In many cities, what they've done is they've gone after the communities they thought were most vulnerable because it would be easier to get away with closing schools there.
The current mayor of New York may have been listening. There's currently a temporary ban on closing schools in New York City. But advocates tell me they'll continue to speak out to show that wiping the slate clean by closing a school could have a ripple effect that can't be seen in statistics. Patrice Howard, New York.
We'll now go to Colorado, where we have news of a proposal by the Teachers Council to review history curricula. The group says that some classes shed a negative light on U.S. history. Meanwhile, students and teachers reject the proposed changes. Mary McCarthy has the story.
We want the Curriculum Review Committee voted down. We shouldn't even be talking about this because there are already 2 committees in place to take any concerns about curriculum.
High school students have been the most outspoken opponents to the proposal that what's taught in their highest level honors history course, the Advanced Placement Program, should be more patriotic.
Just because we're teenagers doesn't mean we are completely apathetic about our education.
The most controversial part of the Jefferson County proposal suggested that history courses shouldn't condone civil disorder or social strife. Students and teachers responded with their own act of civil disobedience, walking out of class in schools across the large district in the western suburbs of Denver. With protests growing bigger by the day, the school board organized a meeting open to debate.
I have a great hope that our conversation this evening will bring this board together.
Supporters of a revised curriculum say that for now, the history lessons focus on the negative aspects of what they call American values, like capitalism.
Free markets weren't presented in a fair manner, and whether or not they were good or bad for the growth of the country.
Some of the conservative voices suggest that even issues like slavery should be considered from a positive standpoint.
You know, what the impacts of slavery were with regard to the Constitution, and really the fact that our Declaration really made it inevitable, perhaps, that slavery would be abolished in this nation. And that's possibly a different presentation of the topic.
Meanwhile, the protesting students questioned how the school board and parents could be qualified to rewrite a curriculum written by professional academics.
Do you have college-level history experience to informatively decide what we should be taught in any college-level class?
The conservative push to alter the history curriculum is not unique to Colorado.
There are a lot of individuals, especially on the right, who are self-proclaimed conservatives, even Tea Partiers, who really do believe that there should be American exceptionalism taught in schools. There are individuals who believe, you know, the fallacies that have been perpetuated for many years about Christopher Columbus, the Pilgrims, how slavery ended, and they believe that's what should be taught.
Education journalist Nicholas Garcia suggests the debate has become so heated because the proposal was put forward during political season in a politically influential region.
Most students, you know, really saw this as a political tactic to invade their classrooms. We have an election year coming up, and Jefferson County is a microcosm of Colorado, a very crucial swing state. You know, Jefferson County very well might decide who runs the U.S. Senate.
For now, the conservative majority on the school board here is offering what it calls a compromise, saying the review committee for the history curriculum will include both teachers and students. But that's not enough for some of the angry students, some of whom continue to stage protests. Mary McCarthy for Telesur, Arvada, Colorado.
The United States is submerged in the fast food market. It's cheap, rich in calories, and saturated in fat in some communities. It's available on virtually every corner, but the availability of fast food is directly related to obesity rates, especially among racial minorities.
Una epidemia se expande a pasos agigantados.
Obesity is a rapidly growing epidemic amongst Americans and affects 80% of the population over 25 years old. The most affected in the society are the Hispanics, a minority with higher genetic tendency to gain weight. Currently, 32% of Hispanics in the U.S. suffer from obesity.
There's also a cultural component, and it has been documented that immigrants that come to this country from Latin America, there's more of a tendency to gain weight, probably because there's differences in the food, readily available foods that are very high in calories and sugar, and particularly for kids, things that parents like to give kids as treats. So that's more common here. It's cheaper than in their country. So.
A situation that declines with publicity, targeting Hispanic children. Fast food restaurants like McDonald's sell up to 74 burgers per second, resulting in a diet of high calories and fat that sells quickly and at a low price. Restaurants like this have an income of $24 million. Health promoters in the U.S. Capitol are fighting against this epidemic. Information is their weapon against the giants of the nutrition industry. Sylvia describes the fat, sugar, and salt content contained in fast food and what this means for the consumer's health.
When we have family groups, we notice that the kids have overweight. Also, when we visit schools, we realize that there are indeed a lot of obesity problems among Hispanic children.
The
lifestyles and traditions of some older Hispanics have kept them away from this food industry spiral.
It is not hard. It is a matter of preserving your tradition. Everything your parents taught you, that is it, and pass it on to your children.
At the same time, malnutrition has created a market of around $20 million of annual medical expenses on obesity and overweight-related diseases.
Andrea Arenas para Telesur en Washington.
Berkeley, California has become the first city in the US to approve a soda tax in response to the city's high rate of diabetes and obesity. Rachel Silverman tells us about one group of supporters that launched a campaign in the hopes of reducing sugar consumption and improving public health.
My name is Nick. I'm with the Yes on D campaign in favor of the soda tax that's going to be on the ballot in Berkeley.
Volunteers are working the phones in this Northern California college town, ground zero for the war against soft drinks. They call their campaign Berkeley versus Big Soda, and it pits nearly every elected official in Berkeley against one of the country's most powerful industries, the Goliath that produces soft drinks. Those who vote yes on Measure D will be voting for a 1-cent tax per ounce on sugary drinks.
We need to start a movement that alerts the country, first our city, but then the state and then the country, to the dangers of the sugar-sweetened beverages.
City Council member Lori Capitelli says he's alarmed by the rates of obesity and diabetes in Berkeley, particularly for children.
Almost 40% of our kids, our ninth graders, are either overweight or obese. 1/3 of the kids in Berkeley, age 12 and 13, will likely wind up with diabetes in their lifetime. That number goes to 1 in 2 when you talk about African American and Latino kids.
Supporters of the soda tax say the higher prices will discourage people from drinking sugary drinks, which will in turn lead to a decrease in obesity, diabetes, and other health issues. But those against the tax say it unfairly targets people who buy soft drinks, often those at the lowest end of the income scale.
It's regressive in that it has a disproportionate impact on folks at the lower income level. It's misguided in that the city of Berkeley has higher priorities to be dealing with than regulating people's food and beverage choices. And it's expensive in that it's going to end up costing consumers and the businesses in Berkeley millions of dollars in lost revenue at a time when they can least afford it.
Take a closer look at Measure D, the Berkeley beverage tax, and you start to notice something strange.
No on D has raised serious money for the campaign and filled a war chest with more than $2 million, more than enough to pay for a series of slick television spots.
The principal funders of the No on Measure D campaign is the American Beverage Association California PAC.
And who are the principal funders of that?
Those are the beverage companies, Pepsi, Coke, Dr. Pepper, Snapple, those companies.
The campaign for the soda tax started out as a grassroots effort, with campaigners going door to door in Berkeley neighborhoods to get their message out.
Hi, my name is Evelyn. I'm a volunteer with Yes on D in favor of the soda tax.
The Yes campaign recently got a big shot in the arm with a donation of $85,000 and some slickly produced TV commercials of its own from billionaire Michael Bloomberg, a former mayor of New York whose efforts to fight big soda in the Big Apple failed.
Let's reverse the epidemic. Vote yes to Measure D and no to childhood obesity and diabetes.
Some 30 special taxes on sugary drinks have been introduced in various states and cities across the United States since 2009, but none have passed. This Berkeley tax of 1 cent an ounce and an even tougher one of 2 cents an ounce up for a vote across the Bay in San Francisco may well be the first. Rachel Silverman for Telesur in Berkeley.
That's all for The Real USA. Don't forget to tweet your comments and suggestions to @TeleSurEnglish. I'm Sarah Bagan. See you next time.